we are so happy to have you back here in New Haven, virtually, if not physically, Gareth. Um, I think yesterday you were reminding us that this is our 18th New Haven Fearless Caregiver Conference, and so I'm so happy that we're doing it. So I am looking forward to a very wonderful day with you guys. And as always, Gary's our host. This event is hosted every year in New Haven by the Agency on Aging of South Central Connecticut. That's us. That's where I work. I have the good fortune to be in my 20th year with that organization. As caregivers, we are all striving to be good enough, to do the job well enough that we create a safe environment for the people that we love, a loving environment. And we can all do that, irrespective of COVID. So we're going to talk a lot today about a lot of those things. And I really look forward to sharing with you. And now turn it over to Gary.
You know, it's always the first call you make is to the Agency on Aging, because if they don't have the answer, they'll find the answer, or they know the person who has the answer. You really are our partners in care. Everybody is stop and smile. You see how that makes you feel? It lifts you. No matter what you're going through, and I know we're all going through things as family caregivers, trust me, but when you smile, it not only lifts your face, it lifts your soul. Steve, how has COVID changed what you might suggest to a family caregiver to have, what documents you might suggest for them to have, or has it just made it more imperative that they have these documents?
I think it's made it more imperative for people to have documents. A trust or a will or a power of attorney didn't necessarily change because of COVID, although we might see certain changes within the language of something. For powers of attorney, there was a very common time where people did what's called a springing power of attorney. A springing power of attorney means the person who you name, the so-called agent, didn't have any power to act until the person was incapacitated. We're seeing more people do durable powers of attorney these days, which basically means that incapacity will not impact the powers on it, just to avoid going out. So that's been one of the few changes, but it's really shown why we need the documents, whether it's for financial transactions, simplifying things from a care standpoint, making sure there's really decision makers that are available, because it's harder. You can't go into the hospital with a loved one. I mean, I had to take my dad to the ER during COVID. I couldn't go in. I'm his power of attorney. I'm his attorney. I'm his, I have all the powers I can give by law. I still could not go into the facility at that time because they were not allowing any visitors in. So making sure that the facility had my contact info, making sure they had copies of all the documents, and copies isn't necessarily a photocopy. Copy is I brought them originals to the hospital with me when we took him in, so that they could certify that they saw the original and then give it back to me after they scanned it in their system. Not a photocopy, but a copy of the original, essentially. So they actually were able to certify it in their system that they had it, make sure I had the contact info in their system so that they knew to call me. They knew how to reach me at all hours to make sure I was in constant contact. So I think making sure everything is organized, simple, that you know where those documents are. When I had to take him in, it wasn't, okay, now where did I put the power of attorney? Where was his healthcare docs? We had envelope by the door. Just grab it on our way out. Didn't have to think, didn't have to look. So I think it's made it important to not only make sure we have the documents, but we have them accessible. I think, COVID has really pushed that accessibility level of you need to know where things are and how they work. And it's been proof of something I've preached for years, which is that documents are just pieces of paper. It's the plan behind the documents, how they're going to be used, how they're going to work, who's going to be empowered. That was always the important part. And COVID has shown that, because you can have a document and still not be able to accomplish what you need to if you don't know how it's going to work or how you're supposed to utilize it. So I think it's really helped push some of that to the front and show that we really need to work on those things and really kind of combine them all together instead of it being just something simple at this point. We really need to work on these holistic plans. So we need to make sure that the documents aren't just valid, We need to make sure the documents are good, that they fit the situation, that they're actually going to be used. And COVID has really pushed a lot of these issues to light because there's a lot more limits. We're not getting that FaceTime at the bank. You're getting a few, half of the lobbies in this area are closed. My branch for our bank for the office, they haven't been open for 2 months because of COVID. So you're not getting that FaceTime if you actually have an issue. You're not getting someone who's going to know you. You're giving them a power of attorney. You're driving through, you're giving them a copy of a document that they're going to spend all of 3 minutes reading if you're lucky. You need to make sure it actually does what it's supposed to do, because you're not going to be able to convince someone if it's not in black and white that you're supposed to do it. And COVID has really pushed those things to light because we see all these transfer issues. We're seeing issues with care, with getting care, whether it's home care, whether it's facility care. People aren't going out. They're not leaving. If you have a parent who's in a nursing home and you need to go to the bank with them, you can't just go to the facility, pick them up, take them to the bank and bring them back. Most of the facilities aren't letting people out. And the few that do, if you bring your parent out, they have to quarantine by themselves for 2 weeks every time you bring them back. So it's a bigger and bigger thing now. And it's really pushing to the forefront the need of these documents and the need to have them set up in a way where they're just going to work. We wanted things to just work so that when time comes, when you have that situation, you have that event, I call them transitional events versus crisis events. The difference, Bev, do you know what the difference is between transition and a crisis? Because I bet you do.
No, I really don't.
How about Jack? You got a guess?
I'm going to let you go with it.
All right. The difference between a transition and a transition and a crisis are the same. They're the event or an occurrence. There's some event, some occurrence that has happened in our lives. But the difference is in the crisis, we have no idea what we're going to do next. We're kind of just running around that chicken with the head cut off. In the transition, we have a plan. So we're going to just deal with the situation. We have an approach. We know who's the decider, who's going to handle the situation, how we're going to, what our approach is going to be. So then when we have something else happen to us in the next transition, we're already ready to go because each transition leads to another plan for the next one. Whereas in the crisis, we just keep running crisis to crisis to crisis. And what ends up happening is when you hit a crisis, what do you end up doing? You cope. We don't plan. We just start coping and we just deal with it. And then we have another crisis and we cope again. And then we'll have another one and we'll cope. And pretty soon that starts spiraling and it starts spiraling down because we've gone through all these crises and all of a sudden we're just out of control and we get to the bottom of the spiral and we're just lost everything. We've lost our power. We've lost our energy. We're depressed because we didn't plan.
Yeah.
When we have a transition, we have the ability to go crisis to crisis or event to event and occurrence to occurrence, and we don't spiral because we're being proactive. When we're proactive on things, it tends to really help not only ourselves, but our loved ones. And it's a big thing. I love preaching for people to do a transition. Having a proper plan, having the proper documents in place allows us to go to these transitions and not have that crisis.